If you grew up in a home where you were negatively affected by your parents drinking, or in fact your partner grew up in such a home, it can have serious implications on your own relationship now as an adult. And joining me as always of a Tuesday to give advice on that situation in your relationship is our relationships expert, David Kavanagh. David, you're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
I imagine being the adult child of a parent with alcoholism or a parent with addiction is actually quite common in Ireland, because we have a big issue that we don't even see in public, but certainly in the privacy of our own homes, the children will be aware of their parents having a drink problem, even if nobody outside the home would have that problem.
Yeah, and if the parents themselves don't think that they have a drinking problem, it doesn't mean that the children don't think the parents have a drinking problem. I've yet to meet anybody who's ever come to me for therapy who said, I'm an alcoholic, first off, and said, I have a problem with drinking. Most people get to a stage where somebody else comments on their drinking to the point where relationships are affected, person isn't able to be a good parent, there's work performance issues. Again, people then say, but like, I turn up to my job every day, I'm doing a good job. But it's how it affects children when they see their parents being out of control or very hungover, or if they spend lots of time in pubs or socialising. That can have a very negative impact on children as they then become adults. So that's what we're looking at today. It's
very interesting actually on the foot of this, because on Pat Kenny earlier they had an alcoholic mother, that's terrible, a woman with alcoholism who was a parent, I suppose is a better way of describing it, and she was talking about her own difficulties trying to parent as a woman with alcoholism and all that sort of stuff. So we're talking about actually the child of that parent now grown up and experiencing. What kind of issues, if you are that adult child, do you bring to your relationship? Like what kind of behaviours might you have as that adult child that maybe are damaging your own ability to have a relationship?
Okay, and this is it's probably going to maybe affect more people than we realise, but a huge need for control would be the first thing that I would notice. And we call these people adult children of alcoholics, again, even if your parents weren't technically speaking alcoholics. But if there's excessive drinking in the household, we characterise people in this category as ACOAs, adult children of alcoholics. So a huge need for control would be the first thing that you might find. So if you're living with somebody who you think is a bit OCD or is always trying to be in control or dictates to you and tells you how you should live your life, and is a bit hard to live with as a consequence, look back in their childhood, because that would be a common characteristic of somebody whose parents, their drinking was out of control. So now as an adult, people try to control as much of their environment as they can do.
Is that because there was no control in their household growing up? So they grew up in a chaotic household and now control has become a thing?
It mightn't have been too chaotic. It might have been quite disciplined. It might have been quite organised. But the children themselves experience themselves as being out of control, because they might say to their mother or father, look, let's not be out drinking too late now on Friday night, because you know what you're like on Saturday, you're hungover and we can't go to the sports ground and do all the fun stuff. And the parents just drink anyway because they need to drink and they're dependent on alcohol. So then the next day is ruined. The children experience
so sometimes
hangover.
Those children may have appealed to their parents to stop and to notice them or to engage with them, but the parents didn't because of the addiction.
Yep.
And that felt like a rejection, did it?
It felt like rejection, but also felt like the children had no control over their environment. So I mean, and like when you're a child, you're obviously dependent on your parents. You're dependent on them to come home on time. So if they, if you're 11 or 12 years of age and they say they're going to come back from the pub or a birthday party or whatever it is at X time, 9 o'clock at night, and they don't rock in till 12 o'clock at night, and you're there with a babysitter, but you're 12 and your parents come in drunk and you're up because you're anxious, it's going to have a knock-on impact then as you become an adult, because you're just going to have a stronger sense of a need for control, which means that when you're in a relationship with somebody else, you're going to try and control their behaviour. And that's where the problems start at that point, because obviously a partner who doesn't come from that background doesn't want to be controlled and thinks that your behaviour or your thinking is completely irrational and wrong, and they can't live with that. That's where the challenge is.
So in their context it's irrational, but you have a context for it that kind of makes it rational.
Totally rational.
Okay.
And totally understandable to you as the person who's grown up in this environment.
What else might somebody experience? What other kind of things?
Right, so fear of abandonment would be a very core central construct or issue that people who've come from alcoholic type environments would have. So a fear of abandonment would be a fear of loss of a relationship, loss of a significant relationship. So as they get closer to somebody, as they approach, let's say they're with somebody 2 or 3 years, then an engagement is about to happen. So that will stir up anxiety for the person.
So the closer they get to somebody, the more anxious they might get. Correct. Because they're becoming increasingly vulnerable to abandonment.
To abandonment at that point.
And is that because they felt abandoned by their parents, that they felt their parents had, again I'm using the word rejected, but had abandoned them for alcohol?
Well, possibly, because I mean, if you're in a pub situation and you're 12 years of age, for example, right? you're approaching your parents looking for attention, looking for acknowledgement. Maybe something's happened. You're out running around the beer garden, whatever. You've fallen over, you tripped, and then you approach your parents looking for a bit of support and a bit of sympathy. But they're busy. They're maybe after having 2-3 glasses of wine or beer, or whatever. They're a little bit drunk, a bit merry, a bit dismissive of you. So then they say, "I look, go off and buy you a packet of crisps," and off you go again. And sure, so that kind of feeling of rejection can ultimately lead to a sense of abandonment by your parents.
So are we saying that, actually go on and talk me through the other things, because I'm starting to come up with some thoughts on this myself.
Sure.
So what about pushing partners away?
Yeah, so again, children where there was alcohol dependency or excessive alcohol drinking, they will tend to, they're craving intimacy because they want that stability of a normal, healthy, happy relationship. But they don't know what that feels like because they've never had a model for it in their own childhoods. So, our adult relationships are usually dependent on how well our parents modelled relationships to us and for us. So if our parents didn't have a healthy, functioning relationship themselves, which usually they don't because there's excessive drinking in it, then we become, in need of pushing people away to keep that fear of intimacy at bay as well, because it just, again, raises our anxiety too much. And that's where the challenge is. So
the closer we get to somebody, the more intimate we become with them, we push back against that. So the closer we get, the more likely we are to sort of sabotage our relationships.
Sabotage is the key word there. We sabotage, or we criticise, or we complain, or we just kind of become OCD, or we just focus on all the negatives that our partner has rather than seeing the positives of the relationship. So if you're the partner of a child of an ACOA, you can feel like nothing you do is good enough. So that's the sense people have. God, I'm working really hard. I'm raising the kids to the best of my ability, but nothing I do is good enough. And that can come from the adult child's experience of excessive drinking.
Okay.
All connected.
It sounds to me, I mean, what you're saying is that the fear of abandonment, the pushing partners away and testing them almost, that kind of inability to trust intimacy and the fear.
Yeah.
Are the adult children of alcoholic parents very insecure? Is that what it is? Is it kind of a chronic insecurity at the core of they don't have a secure attachment to their own parents, so they find it hard to...
A secure attachment.
It's where I talked about these things before, but they don't have a secure attachment to their own parents, so they find it hard to replicate secure attachments elsewhere.
Exactly. So the love object, which is the partner of an ACOA, is somebody that's, they just find it hard to understand. First of all, it could be low self-esteem issues, like, why do you love me? Because you're an amazing person, yeah, but why do you really love me? And that's, again, pushing the partner away. And it's just this sense of not being good enough, insecurity. Again, so you have things like jealousy, you might have anxiety, you might have depression. And obviously then a lot of ACOAs go on to become drinkers themselves because they can't cope with what they experienced as kids. It was too painful, and reliving the trauma is too challenging. So they just start excessively drinking themselves.
Okay, so we have some understanding around this now. There's obviously a lot of baggage there, and,
yes.
and people are controlling. People push you away when they get too close. They test you. They're a bit insecure. They might suffer themselves with drink issues or anxieties and depressions, and they find intimacy challenging. Is there a way of fixing all this? Because loads of people are texting, David. Someone says, wouldn't you know if somebody grew up in a home like that? Wouldn't you know what you were dealing with? Someone else says, what can the adult who is impacted do to change these issues? They aren't their fault, but their upbringing, but nonetheless
Absolutely.
They're living with it. Someone else says, I'd be curious about the long-term effects for ACOAs who grew up with sober alcoholics. So your parents weren't drinking, but
yes.
they still had that addiction there. And there's a good few other ones I'll try and get to. What can somebody do if you identify this, that either you or your partner is that person, they are the adult child of a person with addiction or alcoholism? Can you change? Can you teach an old dog new tricks at that stage of their life?
Yeah, you can change now. I mean, obviously going to a psychotherapist might be very, very useful for people. But if you can't afford that, there's some really good books that you can get on codependency by a lady called Melody Beattie. So I'd recommend her stuff as a starting point in terms of understanding.
About not being codependent.
But not being codependent. So that's the name given to the set of behaviours where, people often feel like they're victims of circumstance. They have no control over their lives. They're never happy, but they don't quite know why. These would be all kind of consequences of being an ACOA. So yeah, codependency. Google codependency and find out what you can do about it, because there are many, many things that you can do. It's all about self-care, you see.
Lots of people texting. Someone says, as the now adult child of an alcoholic and the mother of 4 of my own children, my childhood experience led me to drink horrendously in my late teens and 20s and some of my 30s. I then married an alcoholic who I thought was just a party man, as no responsibilities. Didn't realise he was an alcoholic himself as well. I hardly ever drink now, but my life is very difficult as I've made such bad decisions in the past as a result of growing up around so much alcohol, mainly my husband's drinking. There is a great book, Women Who Love Too Much, Don't Let the Title Deceive You. It is a great book for daughters or children of alcoholics. Someone else says, how strong is the genetics here? My dad's an alcoholic. I wonder how strong the genes are. People don't like to think that they're going to walk the same path.
No, we don't.
You do still have choice, don't you, David?
You do. It's like, yeah, but we don't know if it's genetics. It's more learned behaviour from what we now know. Neuroscience would say it's not so much. It's epigenetics, which is another thing people can Google. But it's more learned behaviour. Kids see their parents drinking when they're stressed, angry, upset, happy, sad, and then they think it's normal to do exactly that. It's on every movie, every Netflix program.
True enough, but I still believe we always have choices. Someone says, fair play, Ciara, talking about adult family members affected by alcoholism. As a life coach, confidentiality prevents me from getting involved in this conversation, but I can't say enough about the support of Al-Anon. They don't do publicity, but everyone knows what it's like to be in a family affected by alcoholism who is there. Well done. I think the Rise Foundation do something similar too. I suppose the bottom line is you don't have to write off your life and sort of say, well, my parents were alcoholics, so now I'm sort of screwed. There are ways forward in a good way.
Yeah, don't suffer in silence. Talk to your friends. Recognise that just because they weren't necessarily clinically alcoholic doesn't mean that you weren't affected by their out of control behaviour when they were drunk. And give your partner a break. Get some help, because it's not easy for the partners of a child of an alcoholic, because they have to, undergo all these tests and being pushed away and rejection. So that's challenging too. And, Al-Anon's a great support for some people as well. So look, reach out for support. It's very important.
All right. Look, thank you. That's a really interesting topic. Thank you for that. Indeed, that is David Kavanagh. We'll be back with more relationships, of course, next Tuesday as well.